She has no accomplishments, don't give her a seat, my aunt sneered as I entered the banquet hall. My uncle smirked, let her stand, it's all she's good for. But as I turned to leave, my grandpa stood and said, before you all regret this, let me speak. What he said next made we were eating in. The chandelier's light caught in the rim of my glass as I stepped through the heavy oak doors. Its glare almost blinding after the bitter chill outside, my heels clicked against the polished marble, each step echoing in the silence that followed the sudden drop in conversation. She has no accomplishments. Don't give her a seat. My aunt's voice cut through the hum like a razor. Her lips curled, eyes narrowing over the rim of her champagne flute. Before we begin, drop a comment and tell us where are you from and from which city you're watching our videos, and after watching the whole video, don't forget to tell us. What would you do in this situation? Be honest, tell me in the comments below, we read every comment. Let's begin. I froze for a split second. My hand tightening around the clutch I held, every gaze at the banquet table was on me. Some pretending not to notice. Others leaning in to see my reaction. My uncle chuckled, leaning back in his chair with the smug ease of someone who had always believed he was untouchable. Let her stand. It's all she's good for. He added, tossing the words like scraps to the floor. I swallowed hard, keeping my face blank, though my pulse was hammering. My first instinct was to turn on my heel and walk out. In my mind, I could already hear the whispers trailing me, the ones they'd murmur to each other after I left. I took a step back toward the door. My eyes fixed on the deep red carpet when a chair scraped across the floor. The sound was loud, deliberate. Before you all regret this, my grandfather's voice boomed, steady and commanding, despite his age. Let me speak. The entire table stilled, even the waiter. Mid-pour froze, the dark wine trembling at the lip of the glass. My grandfather rose his cane, tapping once against the floor before he let it rest beside him. Sit, he said, not raising his voice, but the steel in it made everyone obey. My aunt. Smirk faltered. My uncle shifted uncomfortably. His hand moving from his glass to the edge of the table. My grandfather's eyes locked on me, then swept slowly across the room like a spotlight. You think you know her. He began, but you know nothing. He reached into the inside pocket of his suit and pulled out a worn leather folder, the kind that didn't belong to a casual occasion. My heart thudded, confused and wary. I have stayed silent for years. He said, watching you all judge, mock and dismiss her. But tonight, I won't. The weight in the room was almost physical. Even the soft clinking from the kitchen in the back seemed to fade into nothing. My aunt gave a short laugh, trying to pierce the tension. Dad, honestly, this isn't the time. Silence. My grandfather snapped the crack in his voice like the crack of a whip. Her mouth closed instantly, and then he opened the folder. What I saw in his hands made my breath catch, but it was the way his eyes narrowed at the others that made the room feel like it was about to detonate. The air felt heavier as my grandfather placed the folder flat on the table. His hand resting over it like he was holding something dangerous in place. The glint in his eyes wasn't anger, it was something sharper, controlled, calculated. You all, he began slowly, have built your lives on the illusion that respect is inherited, that power comes from your last name, and that worth is measured by how loudly you can belittle someone. His voice was low, each word striking like a hammer. But you forget I was here long before you were spoiled enough to think cruelty was sophistication. No one moved. My uncle's smirk was gone, replaced by a twitch at the corner of his jaw. My aunt adjusted the pearls around her neck, her fingers trembling just enough for me to notice. Grandpa lifted the folder's flap with a deliberate slowness, pulling out a small stack of papers that looked well worn but neatly kept. You want to talk about accomplishments? He asked, eyes darting between them. Let's talk about what none of you have the courage to acknowledge. He glanced at me briefly, something like pride flickering in his gaze, then faced the table again. She didn't ask for my help when the storm hit 2 years ago, he said, sliding the first paper across the table toward my aunt. While you were sipping cocktails in Miami, she was out in the cold, volunteering 12 hours a day for relief efforts after the factory explosion. She organized more aid than your entire so-called charity has in a decade. A flush crept into my aunt's face, but she didn't touch the paper. My grandfather didn't wait for her to respond, and when your business was about to fold last year, Leonard, he said, turning to my uncle, do you know who quietly pulled strings to get the investor that saved you? My uncle's brows drew together. What are you talking about? Grandpa slid another document forward. This one stamped and signed. You're welcome. She kept her. Came off the deal so your pride wouldn't bruise, but you repay her by telling her to stand like some servant. My uncle's throat bobbed as he swallowed. His eyes flicking to me, then away just as quickly. And here's the part you regret the most. My grandfather continued, his tone dropping even lower. You've spent years pretending she's insignificant, when in reality, he let the sentence hang, scanning each face slowly. She is the sole legal heir to the trust that funds this family's legacy. Every cent, every property, every seat you sit in at these very dinners, exists because she allows it. The silence that followed was suffocating. Somewhere in the back, a waiter accidentally dropped a spoon. It clattered on the tile, startling half the room. My heart pounded in my ears, and I could feel every eye shift toward me, no longer mocking, but searching, calculating. My grandfather stepped away from the table, his cane tapping once against the marble, so the question is not whether she deserves a seat. His gaze swept over them like a final judgment. The question is whether you deserve to sit with her. The weight of his words settled over the room like a storm cloud ready to break. I felt my spine straighten, not from pride alone, but from the sudden, undeniable shift in power. But I also knew this wasn't over, not by a long shot. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was the kind of stillness that made your skin prickle, the kind that came before a sudden clap of thunder. My fingers curled slightly against my clutch, not because I needed to hold on to it, but because it was the only thing grounding me as every pair of eyes at that table turned into something different. Some were wide with disbelief. Others narrow calculating, and a few my aunts especially burned with a hatred so sharp I could almost feel it across the room. Finally, my aunt gave a dry laugh, though her voice trembled just enough to betray her.